Hey guys, thanks for joining us here for episode 4 of Cage Side Convos. I'm Rick.
I'm Quince.
Today we're just going to talk a little bit kind of about artistic expression, kind of the different definitions of what art can be, and kind of an interesting thing actually to before we get rolling on that is something that happened to me this morning that kind of tied into something that you had asked me about a couple weeks ago. Driving into the gym, Quince had asked me, I think it was a second episode when we were kind of like highlighting day one, if, you know, how day one was growing and changing.
How it's evolved since the start of it?
Yeah. So one thing I've been noticing probably about the last 3 weeks in training is the phrase day one has been popping up a lot. Which I kind of think part of it is, you know, the more you look for something, the more you're gonna find it,
sure.
Right? But it popped up to me one night when I was coaching jiu-jitsu, and I was speaking like very specifically for my jiu-jitsu watchers out there. We were doing mount work, and you always say, you know, keep yourself safe and keep your arms tucked in, keep your elbows tucked into your side. And I was like, that's something you learn on day one. You know, and for some reason that just kind of popped to me that night. And over the next couple of weeks, I noticed I was saying stuff like that a lot in training, especially when we're boxing. You know, keep your hands up. You know, that's something you learn day one. Keep your hands up, right? And then I was having a conversation with the owner the other night, and we were talking, and he said something. He was like, "Yep." He's like, "That's just some day one shit." And so it really kind of clicked with me. And this morning, driving in, I was finally able to piece together exactly why it was resonating in my mind so much, and it was this notion of the importance of what we learned on day one. And so your first day on a job, your first day in school, when you do like they go over like your syllabus or your introduction to your classes, your training days and stuff like that. You know, they tell you, the most important stuff, remember this,
right?
And then if you like down the line, if you screw up, they're like, what'd you do? You should have learned that on day one. You know, so there's such an emphasis, there's such an importance on what you put or what you learn on day one, right? Your first day, like I said, of a job or of school or, you know, whatever endeavor you're undertaking. And I translated that to kind of the sweeping day one philosophy of, if you put that amount of importance into everything you learn, into every experience that you have, one, I think it kind of connects you more to what you're experiencing, and two, it makes you appreciate it even more, because like every lesson could and should be an important one, you know, and something kind of you hold on to.
Sure.
So it gets rid of that kind of dismissive mindset of, oh, I don't need to worry about this. You know, if you you know, have a real day one attitude, you know, everything kind of becomes important.
So it changes. It goes from just a cliche term or meaning to actually having some substance to it.
Right. Absolutely. And I loved, you know, so when you and I have been talking over the past week, you know, just regular conversations and stuff, but the notion that day one is kind of in itself like a living, breathing experience.
Sure.
You know, outside of just a, you know, sweet T-shirt or sticker or something.
It is a sweet T-shirt, though. Yeah, no, it is. It's its own entity, it's its own consciousness almost that you can reflect on and learn through. You know, and such as art. Actually, there's a really cool quote by Henry Moore, and it's to be an artist is to believe in life. You know, I think pretty much all of art is a reflection of our individual experience throughout life. And I think that story is a great segue and a great example of, you know, a reflective life and one of adaptation and, you know, and a redefining of self and definition through.
Right.
And I think a lot of these concepts are very artistic concepts, almost like an artistic perspective, if you will. And, you know, that's something that I just want to talk a little bit on today, is just the artist within us. And I don't necessarily mean the artist within us, or even in the traditional sense. I think a lot of times when people talk of art, they think of painters and people who draw, music, of course, and even fighting. But, you know, I think We're trying to break the mold of a lot of those traditional definitions, so as to incorporate, a lot of the people that might be, end up watching this later on this afternoon, might be watching at work, and they don't understand that what they're doing, that work that defines them, is also an art, or there's also an art to it. So I think the overall goal of the message today is to, just to be able to find a deeper meaning in life by promoting an artistic-minded approach, to your day-to-day.
I like that too. Something I think is important, and something that helped me a little bit through really some of the mundane jobs I've had. Construction, for example. But yeah, you could look at his construction as just showing up and just hammering some nails and just, I built barns, I built cow barns, so there wasn't, they're big, but it's not like it's a cathedral, or it's not like this $1 million home or anything special to it. But what I learned to appreciate very quickly was that there was a certain art into building and making and creating.
Sure. Sure.
So it was always kind of cool for me, and I did it for a little over 5 years. But the whole time I worked there, every time we'd work all day. We'd start, the groundwork would be done. We'd start setting poles for this 600-foot pole barn,
right?
600 foot long, 120 foot wide. And by the end of 2 days, you have all these poles stood up, and it's this huge monument to kind of like perseverance and creativity and stuff. And you start setting the rafters and putting on the roof. And so you see all this kind of from the ground up kind of build. And it never, the whole time I did it, never ceased to kind of leave me in awe of the creation of building,
sure.
It definitely helped break the mundane.
Sure, the monotony, just a different way of looking at it.
Sure.
I guess I spent a lot of time, a lot of my grind were 9 to 5s.
Sure.
And not one, but maybe 2, and sometimes, 3 at a time, just to kind of push toward what I wanted to do for a living. And I found that, honestly, 9 to 5, like I've worked retail before and retail management. And that's not, not necessarily at face value enjoyable whatsoever for me, especially when I want to be on the stage, I want to be, rocking shows, and, traveling and things like that. But first and foremost, I knew what I was there for, and I knew where I wanted to get to. So I knew that I had to find the art in what I was doing. And retail management, honestly, was, you got to know your product. It's an education of the product, but also it's the art of dealing with people and how you interact with the people you work with, the people that work for you, and the people that you work for, whether it be people that are above you or, of course, the customer base. So, I had to redefine myself and my interactions amongst those different crowds. And I'm like, oh, there's an art to this. Oh, doing it this way makes my job easier. Doing it this way motivates my coworkers differently. So, it's just a slight, simple change of perspective that I think, helped me kind of push through some of those, like you said, mundane issues.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, but before I get too carried into the different type of mediums of art, I guess I first want to define art, at least for myself, because as you and I were talking about before, art in the definition of is rather subjective, which means it's, differs from person to person, their character, their experience. And there's no real wrong answer. I mean, I'm sure there are probably a couple wrong answers out there, But, in the general sense, or at least for me, to me, art is an expression of an idea or an emotion through any variety of mediums. And that's pretty broad, but I think I try to simplify it down to its basic essence. I don't know if just off the top of your head you have a definition of art or what it means to you.
Yeah, so it kind of resonates like what you said. So art is how we express an idea or an emotion, and that's how a lot of people cope or deal or understand, especially like negative emotions. But also, I think artistic expression can be like a reflection of how we view the world.
Sure.
Especially like pained artists, and this is their creation of how they see the world. You
right.
know, and just sometimes it's a way to reconcile what's around us or like deal with cognitive dissonance.
Absolutely.
And stuff like that.
Absolutely. And I think that's perfect because that's actually one of the purposes of art. There are many purposes of art, and is something like that sounds more like a practical purpose. Just as far as art as the faculty of, I just want to break down into three different aspects of. So, you've got a practical purpose for art, you've got a cultural purpose for art, as well as a historical purpose for art. And, starting with practical, I think things like the need to communicate, feeling like you might be without a voice, that you're going unheard or unseen, being able to reevaluate or reinterpret how you speak or how you move, so that as you are to be seen, so you can be seen, so you can be discovered. But of course, that in turn means that you have to rediscover and redefine yourself first. So I think communicating is huge in the striving for art or the striving to create, as well as connection. I think a lot of things that transpire through art have a drive to connect. Whether you're connecting with yourself, whether you're connecting with a certain crowd or a general public, or just other people that you're looking for that might vibe on the same level as you, enjoy the same things as you. And I think a lot of these things are character based, at the individual level, at the practical level.
I think something interesting that you said, so you talked about connection. Yeah. Right. So the connection that lies within art. So sometimes it's an inherent desire to connect. And I see the Yanatel clan is chiming in. Melissa and her husband Rich. Speaking of artists, they do. I think Rich primarily does it. I know Melissa dabbles in it at least a little bit, but they do beautiful resin art.
Okay. Yep.
And I'm going to post a link to that in the comments. It's absolutely gorgeous, the work that they've done. And I've had some interactions with them as well, and been lucky enough to have some conversations. Melissa and I actually sat down yesterday and had a nice long conversation, almost similar to what we're doing now.
Awesome.
And discussing discussing kind of artistry, and for her. So what's really interesting with her and how her and I connected was through Muay Thai, through kickboxing, right? And she's kind of been very open with what Muay Thai has done for her and what studying that art has done for her. And for me, I always explore it as expression, and how I move my body and stuff. That's how I express myself. Well, for her, I believe she almost explored it more as like a healing kind of thing, right? So some of what we talked about yesterday was how she kind of viewed me as a healer, because I was able to offer these people this medium to express themselves, whereas I would be more inclined to view her and I both as artists. So another, kind of different perceptions. We connected over the same, in my mind, art, over in her mind, like healing process, you know. But just our different perceptions and what it's done differently for both of us. So you take the same medium, okay, so it's kickboxing, so Muay Thai, and you put two people in it. Two people have, the same physical experience, but emotionally, holistically, spiritually, it's a different experience. The expression, what we get from it. But it is has driven and has spurred one of the very deep connection.
Sure.
And I think it does that.
I can only imagine. That's the art of healing, or the art of Muay Thai, and imagine how those roads intersect and how many different intersections there must be once you change your perception on the whole thing, which I think is part of the beauty of it. Because I do believe we're all, whether or not we see it, we're all creative beings, and that doesn't mean maybe you don't have the most, the biggest imagination, or maybe you don't draw or sing or anything like that. But I do believe that we have the ability to create. Yes. Therefore, in whatever realm or whatever respect, and therefore we are creative beings.
Yeah. That article of actually Melissa's again. We should have just had you here today, Melissa.
Right.
She wrote that little piece on creation is the opposite of war.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? So
absolutely.
War
sounds like
and,
a Sun Tzu quote.
Right?
Yeah.
And she built an amazing her perspective on it. But discussing a lot of how like native tribes would teach their children how to create and to like whittle and be artistic at an early age, right?
Sure.
So war destroys things and cripples economies and kills people, buildings, etc.
Right.
And everybody thinks the opposite of war is peace, but peace is a very like passive kind of thing. Peace is just doing nothing, whereas creation is building and rekindling. Right. It's through creation. Absolutely, yes. And so if I botch any of her quotes, she's right.
Oh, she's got you. Yeah.
But yeah. So but I think that speaks to exactly what you're talking about, is how inherently we are creative beings.
Yeah.
There's a need within us to create something beautiful, and however that resonates with us and however that comes out, that's our art.
Yeah.
Whether it be music or painting or martial arts or whatever the medium may be.
And I was thinking about, when mulling some of this stuff over, I was thinking about like why is there such a strong need to create or to connect?
Right.
Create to connect to something bigger than ourselves. And I was discussing some of these topics with a friend, and she said the need to connect comes from and I think she used the word curse, but she says, the need to connect comes from the price of consciousness. And I haven't completely wrapped my mind around it yet, but I love the quote, the need to connect is the price that we pay for consciousness. And to not go through this big, expansive universe or this life alone or feeling alone. That's just something I wanted to, revisit a little bit and kind of put out there. I thought she nailed it. I thought she nailed it.
Yeah, that's incredibly powerful. And I saw Rachel chimed in with the Brene Brown quote, that vulnerability is kind of the birthplace of creativity, right? So I think that we can't talk about connection without talking about vulnerability, without talking about Brene Brown. But I think that's absolutely astute because especially so my first endeavor into artistry, I guess, was writing. Mm-hmm. So I love to write, and I felt the most connected with myself. Kind of like you mentioned earlier, I felt the most connected with myself when I wrote. And I just felt very real on the page. And I remember, the first time I showed somebody something I wrote, I was so nervous because that's who you are, and you're very, very vulnerable when you do that.
Yeah.
But the first time somebody reads something, it's like, holy shit, man, like that's awesome. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I know you've had that experience,
Man, and it's, funny story. Even before I was known for anything at all, I'd make some beats here and there, but I love to freestyle. Love to freestyle all the time, and even, this is back in Ithaca, and I'd find myself in groups and they were freestyling and they seemed to do it, carelessly or effortlessly. And I wanted to hop in, but every time I'd hop in, it was almost beyond me.
Sure.
I'd ask everybody, are you holding me back? Yeah. Are you holding me back? Yeah. And I'd have to hear them say, no, I'm not holding you back. Yeah. And I feel completely free to, just do what I do. Yeah. And, it is art, an expression is very vulnerable. And for me, I had that little, whatever, quirk that I had to actually come right out and ask people. Yeah. And, and looking back now, of course it makes me smile a little bit. Yeah. As far as that validity needed. But it's true. You know, I was very self-conscious about it. I was very self-conscious about putting myself out there. But the power, or the sense of control over self within an environment was huge as far as what I got in return when I put myself out there.
Well, and I think too, a lot of that reassurance that we're creating something valuable is necessary, right? Because especially when our creation is stemming from deep inside of us, and we externalize that, if our art isn't good, something in our mind tells us that we're not good.
Sure.
Because like, okay, world, this is who I am. This is what I have to offer you. And if somebody says that's really shitty, man, you're like, all right,
Just
like,
crumple this up and
okay,
start over.
Right. So, but yeah, I think that resonate. I know it resonates huge with me, man. That need for reassurance, and I have some friends that some friends that I'll go to after this and be like, yo, go watch that. Tell me what it's like. What'd you think about what I said?
Yeah.
Just kind of stuff like that. But I think it's vulnerability is great, but I don't think it ever isn't scary. I don't think.
Especially when you continue to change
throughout
life. I think that's what it is. I think if you were to stay the same in that same place from which you started, from which was validated, and you don't change from there, you don't need any more validation. You don't. There's nothing else to be vulnerable about. Yeah. But if you keep pushing your limits, you're always going to feel vulnerable in that on that next level that you get to. I think
speaking of like growth, obviously, we say growth comes outside of your comfort zone. There's this awesome graphic that I saw, and it's lost to me now in the ether of the internet. But basically, it was a graph that showed your comfort zone, and then basically a line at the bottom said like where growth happens, and it extended outside of the comfort zone. And just I'm doing a horrible job of explaining that, but the visual to me. Being very, sometimes like very statistically minded, very math oriented and stuff. When I saw that on paper, like in graph form, it kind of clicked that yes, growth doesn't happen where you're comfortable. Growth doesn't happen when you stay the same.
Sure.
And yes, it's nice to be validated, but if you really want to challenge yourself and grow, you kind of just have to go. Yes, you have to go where the magic happens. That kind of fit too well in there, Melissa. But yeah, you. Like you said, you have to continue to push yourself and find new ways.
I think a perfect example or a metaphor for it is, I don't know how many horticulture fans out there there are, but I mean, I've got a bunch of plants. I love plants all around my apartment. To me, that's the best vibe, or best furniture, best art. And if you keep a plant in the same pot, it's only going to grow so far. Its roots can only grow so far, so that means it's only going to sprout so far. So you got to replant it in something larger. You got to refill it with, a richer or higher nutrient soil, and you've got to feed it and take it outside of its regular environment for it to grow. So that's the first thing certainly that I think of.
Yeah. You think plants ever get scared when they're in a new pot?
Plants get scared?
You think so?
No, but they stop growing. When they're in the same pot. In a new pot, maybe the roots are a little timid at first.
Sure. So for you, I'm curious. What are some ways you force yourself to step outside of your comfort zone? What are some things you do?
Well, I mean, this right here is a perfect example. Even being a part of this project and hopping in front of a live camera and speaking on topics or subjects that I might not know a thing, you know what I mean? Or have a shaky understanding of, and having the, it's a fine line. I might mess up here and there. I might look like an idiot, or I might come across something that I've never thought before, that I can take with me, and as I move on. So even a project like this is a perfect example of me doing something outside of my comfort, because I can turn on a camera and rap all day long. Something I wrote or memorized, or maybe sometimes even just off the top, and that's still kind of in my comfort zone. But something like this adds value, intrinsic value, because the more and more I grow comfortable with being out of my element, that element now becomes a part of me, and I can take that, wherever I go. I can utilize that for shows and how I interact with people, how I interact with the crowd, how I express myself differently, whether it's through rhyme or just conversation. I think the art of conversation is always something that I want to get better at, and I think this adds to it, exponentially.
Yeah, I love that too. The art of conversation.
The art of conversation.
I mean, we've all had bad conversations.
Sure.
Right. Maybe somebody you just don't gel with, or some inane topic that doesn't resonate with you, whatever. I think we've all had bad conversations, but I don't think you ever fully blame a bad conversation on just one person.
No.
Because I know I've been responsible for having bad conversations before, just not being good at conversation and
Sure.
not practicing it enough.
Sure.
So sure, and it's and if it's something you want to get better at, it's something you can practice.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Which is a very interesting take on it. But like you said before, there's art in everything that you do.
It's the art of.
Yeah.
And I like what you just said, as far as, if it's something that you enjoy, something that represents you, you realize there's an artistry to it, and you want to get better at it.
Sure.
And that's the beautiful thing about art, is there's always a forward progression to be made.
Right.
And you can always get better at it. But to be better at it, that's where the work comes in.
Right.
Just because it's labeled art doesn't mean that it's, it's always recessed. It's always just for fun.
Sure.
Certainly, once you get more into your own personal process, you might, in fact, find it to be fun. You might enjoy the work that might, push some of these new ideas.
Yeah.
I for one do. Even way back when I was doing retail management, I started to enjoy it because I understood the process of it, and I understood the final outcome, and that was for me to save up, get in the studio, get musical equipment, what I mean, so I could start recording, move so I could be in a different area in which art was more at the forefront.
Sure. I think that's another interesting point, kind of making another connection here. So, like you talked about the different purposes of art, right? Mm-hmm. And then even within some of those purposes, like practical, cultural, historical, right? Even like subcategories of like practical use. So like there's connection or something that we need. Mm-hmm. I think there's a purpose, right? There's an artistic expression that you feel is your purpose. So I think that's what people fully resonate with. Like for you, it'd be hip hop. For me, it would be martial arts, right?
Yep.
But I also think that there is leisure art. There's recreational art.
Absolutely.
Like you said, there's recess. And when you can make like something like your job, when you can make that kind of a recreational art, mm-hmm. but then you can tie it back into your purpose, right? You use one art form, like you use your hobby mm-hmm. to become better at your purposeful art, right? So everything then kind of ties together, and so you have all of these experiences to draw from. So like you said, if you get better at the art of conversation, in some way you're going to be able to utilize that to enhance your art of being a lyricist or a writer,
a
rapper,
and connecting.
It's huge. Yes.
I don't know if you remember, and this is funny how things like this keep happening, but there was that Rakim quote, and I don't remember if it was, I think it was the first episode, that paid in full.
Yeah.
Quote by Rakim, who, this rapper in the late 80s, early 90s, certainly one of the pioneers, just put a book out recently. Okay. I just saw, so I like how he's transcending, these different mediums and still being able to, express and come from that creative core.
Continue to grow.
Yeah.
Challenge himself.
Yeah. But yeah, paid in full. Like anything that you put yourself into, it's going to give back. Like we create art as art creates us at the same time almost.
Sure.
And so, like I was saying before, me putting an effort into the topics, into formulating, my thoughts on some of these ideas, or the back and forth, like all that helps. In a general sense of me being an artist or me being a musician or lyricist.
Sure.
Do you find do you find that to be the same way, or work the same way when it comes to Muay Thai or coaching or?
Oh man, absolutely. So one thing I've been like very specifically focusing on. So when we learn jiu-jitsu, especially the way that our coach Paul Elliott likes to demonstrate and teach it, it's very conceptual. So instead of having just like a set form of moves, you have these concepts that translate, right? So concept like control, positioning, and there are specific movements, specific grips that you utilize, specific body movements you utilize, but a lot of these sweeping concepts, again, like control, positioning, timing,
Right.
Offense, defense, stuff like this, I like to translate into Muay Thai.
Sure.
Like, okay, so how do you control yourself in Muay Thai? How do you control your opponent in Muay Thai? Like different aspects, what it means, what control even means, right?
Okay.
So understanding and growing in the art of jiu-jitsu, I have directly started to grow in the art of Muay Thai, and then I take movement patterns and stuff that I recognize in Muay Thai and I translate them back to jiu-jitsu. Or coming from a personal training background, like there's an art in lifting and experimenting with your own body. And then I mean, even in playing guitar, so guitar for me has always been my recreation, right? And I like to get better at it, but it's not such a need that I focus entirely on it, right? So like when I play, I always like, okay, let me fiddle around with something new and just kind of mess around and grow, right? But that teaches you flow and it teaches you improv, and so like freestyling, you know what I mean? It's the same thing as just ripping around on a guitar, right? And so you learn these skills, but I mean, you and I were doing a little training this morning, a little sparring this morning, and at one point I said something like, just feel it, man, just flow with it, and just breathe, flow with it, right? And I mean, how many times have you done something like that when you're on stage? Before, like when you're freestyling, it takes you a second, you gotta flow it, and once you connect to it, right? So that's a concept that translates from music to martial arts, from martial arts to music, into every facet of life.
And art is a great way to kind of disconnect yourself from overthinking. Something to get lost into. A creative and productive use of time.
So disconnect yourself from overthinking by connecting yourself to being in the moment, by being in the flow and the feeling of that artistic expression.
Yeah, and you're kind of just going off of your instinctual nature at that point.
Yeah, yep. I think that's why people have a tendency for different mediums to resonate with them.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Woodworking. Right. So
there's art to it.
Yeah, like I said, my friends, the Anatels, they do the resin painting. There's a reason that clicks with them. And I'm gonna have to ask Melissa next time I talk to her, like, why'd you pick this medium? Because there's always something unique, and you talk to. I'm sure through your travels, you probably met a guy who's been like a lifelong carpenter, does like beautiful trim work. Or my friend Adam Whitney is a very good carpenter. And everybody has these different media that for some reason, something in it clicks with them, and that's where they find themselves getting lost in the moment, being fully connected to what they're doing, and everything else just kind of dissipates. And then when you come out of it, you're just
where'd the time go? Where'd the time go?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then not only to get lost in time like that, but to have something to show for it afterwards. Something positive to show for your time.
Yes.
That's the stuff that stays with me.
Yeah.
And keeps me involved and keeps me moving forward. And those are the type of things that helped reassure the idea of the trust in the process.
Sure. So going back to what last week we talked about goals, tangible and intangible goals, right? So our intangible goal is growing as an artist, but our tangible goal is look what I made. Check out this album I dropped, read this poem I wrote, look at this painting I drew, you know what I mean? For martial artists, man, look at this belt that I won. Check out this knockout highlight reel, you know? So one of the most beautiful expressions of martial arts that I've seen is through working with guys in like fight camp and stuff. So in fight camp, you always pick a couple of things that you want to fine tune. Like these are my go-to, and you drill it so much that when you're in the fray, when you're in the fight, you don't even have to think about it. You just do it, right? And I've seen a couple of times some friends of mine, my friend Taryn that I talk about. I'm going out to Wisconsin next week to see him and train with those guys out there. When I was out there in March, just drilled one specific combo, man, and in this fight there was just picture perfect moment. dropped that across the body and just came up top with this hook and about killed the guy he hit, you know?
Right.
My friend Eddie Stevens, his last fight, we repped out a lot of jiu-jitsu, man. He ended up finishing his fight second round with a very specific transition that we had just repped out. And it's just a beautiful, you know, incarnation. I mean, and you see it on the professional levels all the time.
This guy right here?
Oh, yeah, my man Eddie Stevens.
Ed, what up, bro?
Well, Mark Stevens is on there too. No relation that I know.
Oh, okay, all right.
But he, you know, Mark Stevens is pretty notorious for leg kicks and, you know, having heavy kicks and stuff. And you watch his fights, man, just watch him just chop down dudes' legs and stuff, and it's a pretty grisly thing. But you know, that's his art. Even when it is, you know, maybe even a little more aggressive or whatever, it's still like that's what we've practiced. That's what we've honed. You know, most notably, I think the most recent one that'll probably resonate with more people that are watching is a couple weeks ago, Masvidal knocked out Ben Askren in like 5 seconds, and just like this crazy flying
knee. Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, came right out, bam, rips the knee, right, and everybody's going crazy. Well, then shortly after the fight, video starts surfacing of him like a day or two before practicing that. He's in the cage, practicing it exactly like he hit it in the fight, and that right there, it's just I practice this, and then I use it. It's just refining your art and then putting it to work, man. That's what we have to show for it. Eddie, I love you too, brother.
Absolutely. And you know, and of course we get hung up on our individual mediums, but you know, I hope people can take the time and do some reflecting on, you know, what sort of activities they get lost in. You know, what things that you do every day, whether it's work, whether it's outside that, whether it's hobby, but you know, what sort of things do you allow to represent yourself?
Right.
Because I guarantee there's an art to it.
Right.
You know, and there are levels to it. Yeah. And
even if it's not something you physically do every day, I think you'll find that it's something you think about every day.
For sure.
You either do it or it's in your mind just constantly.
Absolutely.
I mean, how many times are you writing when you're just when you're not actually rapping, you know what I mean? You just
and like on wherever I'm at, on whatever piece of paper I could find.
Yeah.
You know, scribble it down.
Yeah.
You know, when the inspiration comes.
Yeah.
Throw it in my pocket, and you know what? It might go through the wash. I might not ever see it again, but
sure.
That idea and that spark is at the forefront of my mind now.
Absolutely.
So when it hits, I know that it's something I have to act on because it leaves my life more fulfilled.
Right.
Because for me, that's what it's all about.
Right.
And I think really that's the point. One of the points I'm trying to get across is that you know, the artistic practice through our own individual personal mediums enriches our lives, you know, by helping us connect to ourselves and the environment around us. So, you know, it's all about living full days, you know, and feeling fulfilled.
Sure.
And that sort of energy that we can carry around with us and offer to, you know, the people around us, the community around us, and so forth and so on. So
I think what's beautiful about that is the fact that once you understand art as connection, and when you're talking to somebody about something that inspires them, as soon as you recognize that that's their art, doesn't matter what it is, right? It doesn't matter if I never, like, say I didn't like hip hop, never listened to hip hop before. If I understood that as your art, then it could resonate with me, and we could connect over it because that's your artistic expression. You know? Now it becomes more of an umbrella term that brings us together.
You know, absolutely. And you know, it's interesting. So I'm also on the North Country Art Council as well. Yeah. And as the music director, and they didn't have one before, so I hop on the board, and as I sit around a table full of people of all different backgrounds, people who use different mediums, and some people aren't even active artists, but they enjoy getting people together, the art of congregating people.
Exactly.
You know, the art of setting up for these events.
Yeah.
And so even if I have never painted one stroke in my life, I have these great conversations with painters because they go through the same creative process that I do.
Right.
You know, I'm just plugging in my different, you know, medium and my different experience, but the process is already laid out for both of us, and so we have a lot, so much to talk about.
Absolutely.
So much to talk about.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's awesome.
And so our buddy Alex Slurry is the drummer actually for Out Chasing the Lions.
Hey, what up, bro?
You guys are playing at the Musical Fusion Fest this Saturday. I mean, that's a perfect time. There's myriad artists,
art all day.
14 people or something like that.
Well,
different acts.
14 bands, but like live music. Or
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry, live painting.
Yeah.
You know.
Oh yeah. Yep.
So different mediums of art are going to
Sure.
be there, or are going to be represented there.
Yeah.
It's going to be at the Broken String this Saturday,
Yep.
and the Broken String is dope because they've got an indoor area where I'm pretty sure the stage is going to be. Plus, they've also got an open air outdoor space
Yeah.
that's fenced in and it's right by the water. This is over on Huntington Street. I mean, Google it, man. It's 2019.
Yeah.
But it's a really dope spot, and this is the first time that this festival is going to be right in town.
Yeah.
So
So I think this is the seventh year.
this
that
is number 7.
I gotta throw a shout out to my brother John Huntsman, Ill Theory,
Absolutely.
Public Knowledge Records. Man, he's been putting this together, and this is as much of anything is just a labor of love.
Yeah.
He's been doing it for years and years, and John's one of those guys that just wants to rap.
He
That's all
does,
ever
man.
wants
He
to do.
does. Like, I was
Yeah.
talking to him yesterday, and I was like, "Yo," I'm like, "Johnny, man, we got practice Tuesday, 5 p.m. Can you make it?" And he's like, "Look, dude," he's like, "I'm running doubles, 2 a days for work." He does a lot of lawn care and stuff like that. He's like, I'm knocking out 2 a days up until Thursday, so I have the time to put this show together.
Yeah.
Like the amount of work and effort he puts into this, financially and just physically and emotionally, is inspiring in itself.
Absolutely.
So I can't wait. It's going to be a blast. Out Chasing Lions, Chris Levantia, My Manic Mind, Rob Sonic, for you hip hop heads out there, look him up. This dude is an underground icon, man. But he's going to be there. Upgrade. Damn, how many? 14? That's a lot.
It's
a lot.
crazy. I think the band started like noon. It's going all night, but it's amazing, man. The more that you're open to it, the more that you're looking for it, right?
Yeah.
The more you're gonna find it. Man, there's art
Absolutely.
everywhere, and it just and the more you understand it as art, the more you can connect. And the more connected you are, the happier you are.
The more fulfilled. And
Absolutely.
and it's true, man. It's one of those things that once you see or once you're a part of, it's hard to unsee.
Yeah.
It's hard to unstick yourself from that. So it's just something that keeps giving. As much as you give to it, it's going to give back to you. And you get to step back and watch it grow and benefit off that.
Yeah.
Every day, every morning when you wake up. So yeah, man.
Love it. Absolutely, man. Awesome conversation today, man. It's been a lot of fun. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in.
Thanks for joining.
Throwing us some comments. Give us a thumbs up if you really loved it. Give us a share, and we'll be back every week and keep doing it.
Yeah, we'll see you guys at the Fusion Fest, Broken String, Saturday. Peace, y'all.